You're listening to the Westminster Canterbury Tales podcast, creating community to foster joy and well-being. Thanks for listening.
Welcome, everybody. This is the inaugural podcast for the Westminster Canterbury Tales. My name's Roy, and with me I have Mr. Julius Shoulars. I listened to your presentation this past Memorial Day.
Yes.
And, it just sounded like a great story. I mean, you landed in Normandy?
Yes.
I just want to get this on, this inaugural podcast and just get more of your story, just you and me one-on-one just talking. Can I just get a little background information on you? Where were you born?
Richware, North Carolina.
All right. And what year was that?
1925.
All right. Tell me a little bit about your childhood.
Well, I was born in a little town, about 300 people, and I lived there I was born in a two-room house, and my father and mother, my dad built a house that we lived in. Times were kind of tough then. My dad was a carpenter, and if he got a job in a day, he got $1 a day he got paid for. That's how tough it was back there.
And so you were born, 4 years before the Great Depression.
Yes.
So you were a kid when the Great Depression was at its peak.
Yes.
What memories do you have of that?
Well, I can't remember too much because I was rather small then, and as young children, you don't remember too much. But I can remember that we had a tough time because we had no electricity and no indoor plumbing. We had outdoor plumbing, and if you wanted any water to drink, we did have a pump when my dad drilled a well and pushed a pump up through the kitchen floor. So we did have water, but when you wanted heat, you had to put it in a big pan and put it on a wood stove, and we heated it on a wood stove. Really, I don't remember too much about my young life. When I was 6 years old, my dad and my mother decided to move in with my grandfather, who owned a farm in a place called Roxobel, Roxobel, North Carolina. That was about 10 miles from Rich Square. And we helped him on the farm. I can remember going out in the fields and helping pick cotton, pick peanuts, shuck corn, tobacco, putting tobacco, all those things you have on a farm. I can remember that pretty well, but of course, as young as I was, I didn't work too much. I wanted to play. I didn't want to work on a farm.
Right. And this is you said Richway, North Carolina is where you were born?
Yes.
And what was the name of the town you moved to?
Roxobel, Roxobel.
And whereabouts is that?
Well, that's, if you know where Ahoskie is, it's 20 miles southeast of Ahoskie.
Wow, so not too far from here. Okay. And I guess my next question is, what were your teenage years like, before you joined the Army?
Well, we stayed on the farm and worked there until I was 16 years old. And the recession was kind of getting out because the war was coming on. My dad got a good job in Norfolk, Virginia, so that's why I moved along in Norfolk when I was 16 years old. Actually, I stayed in Roxobel to finish my high school because that was my senior year. Now, that's a funny thing, too. And when you moved to Rich Square, or born in Rich Square, your 11th grade was your senior year. In Virginia, the 12th grade was.
Right.
So when I came to Norfolk and I registered to go to school, they knew all this about me, but they said, "You going in the 12th grade?" I said, we don't have a 12th grade. They said, "Well, we'll let you skip the 11th grade."
So you thought you were done with school?
So everybody I talked to about in school, I said I was real smart. I skipped the 11th grade. And then I got a job in Rich Square at a drugstore, soda jerk, making sandwiches, fixing hot milkshakes, and etc.
And where was this, you said?
That was in Rich Square, North Carolina.
Okay, but when you came to Norfolk, you were 16?
I was 16,
yes. And did you get a job in Norfolk?
Yes, I got a job in Norfolk at a drugstore, yes.
Okay. Which drugstore? I don't know if it, whereabouts would that be today in Norfolk?
Well, it's not today. It's torn down today.
Right. But where would it be in Norfolk today? Like, Ward's Corner or something like that?
It was at Bramilton and Olney Road. Yeah, I was. The shipyard was right down the street from where I lived, block and a half.
So, and your father was working at the shipyard, or?
Yes,
Okay.
he had a job at Norfolk Shipyard in Portsmouth, Virginia.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay.
So he transported every day back and forth.
And what year was this?
Well, let's see.
What I'm trying to ask is, had America entered the war yet?
No,
they were just kind of...
No, it hadn't.
Okay.
No, well, I'll tell you how I got in the Navy. I worked in a drugstore until I was 18, and one day I got a letter from Uncle Sam that says, "Come to Richmond, Virginia. We want to see if you're able to be a soldier or a sailor, whatever." So I did. I went and I passed it, and in July I got another letter from him that says, "You passed sources, okay, so we're going to Sampson, New York for a boot camp," which was a brand new camp that the sailors were training to be sailors, if there was such a thing.
Right.
And I stayed there for until, let me get my mind straightened out. I won't tell you any stories. I was there until 3 months.
Okay. So
after we finished our training, we came back home for 2 weeks vacation. I guess you'd call it vacation. And then I had to report back to New York at a boot camp. And we had lost our bags because they were going to transfer us to other places, so we had to sleep on the gym floor on our sea bags. And the other fellows that we had been sleeping in had taken our beds, so we didn't have a bed to sleep in. We stayed there on the floor for 3 weeks, and then we got our orders, and we were transferred back to Norfolk, Virginia.
Oh, wow.
Now, at that time, Camp Shelton and Camp Bradford is what is now Little Creek.
Okay, yeah.
So that's where I was until October, and they sent us down to Fort Pierce, Florida.
Right.
And by that time, we had been adjoined to the Army. We stayed down there until November, came back to Bradford and Norfolk, and in January, January, we were transferred to Lido, New York, to go overseas. That's where everybody was overseas that was in the Army or Navy.
So just to back up, you were essentially drafted, right?
I was drafted, yes.
Right. So how did it work in World War II? Because, I was actually looking at the videos of Vietnam. They had the draft lottery on TV and picking out all the birth dates. But how did it work for World War II? To get drafted? You just got a letter one day that said
you got a letter one day that said, "Report to Sampson, Sampson, New York. You're in the Army." I was really in the Navy, but I was attached to the Army.
So yeah, that's another thing I wasn't too clear on what you meant in your presentation. You said you were in the Navy, but really in the Army. How did that whole thing work?
Well, the Army and the Navy had gotten together, and we were a special. We were a beach battalion. Beach battalions landed on the invasion forces on the first and second days because we controlled the water from the water's edge 100 yards back. Anything that came across the beach, we were responsible for. You didn't go anywhere unless you got permission to go across the beach.
Oh, wow.
So that's what our job was with the Army, is taking care of the beaches and stuff going across the beach. 3 weeks, they let us go. The Army let us go because we had done the job we were supposed to do, and they sent us back to England.
Okay.
And we stayed in England until October, and then we were transferred to Boston.
When you got the letter to go up to Richmond, at that point, was America in the war, or were they just preparing?
Just preparing for it. Still hadn't quite declared war. We really had the war. I told you we didn't have the war, but we did. I was in the war because 41 is right, and I didn't get into the service until 43.
Okay.
So, we and everybody else was training to be in the Army or Navy or whatever.
Right. Do I say you were in the Army, or do I say you were in the Navy?
I was in the Army and the Navy, both.
I mean, okay. So
at the same time.
So from now on, I'll just say when you were in the service.
Okay, that'll be fine.
When you were in the service, and you said it was where Little Creek is now.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a joint base, kind of like it is now already again, because now it's, with Fort Story and Little Creek, it's a Navy amphibious.
It's expanded from Virginia Beach down on into Norfolk.
Right, yeah. So at that point, what was the mood like? Okay, you're a young kid. How old are you at this point when you got that letter?
18.
18. Yeah, like were you young 18? Like as soon as
my birthday's in April, and I got drafted in July.
Wow.
So I was still 18 years old when I was drafted.
And now, everybody else you were with, were they also draftees or were they volunteers? Is the mix?
Well, I was with until we formed the beach battalion, and then they had some older people. Had some people 30 years old. We called them granddaddy. But anyhow, we had a mixture, but mostly it was still 18 years old.
Right. And what was the mood like?
We were training like we're Army. We had calisthenics. We climbed up rope ladders to go up like we were going on board ship.
Right.
We marched around with packs on our back and a false gun on our shoulder. And we would go out in small boats like we were going to come back in and landing on a beach.
Right.
We'd come back in.
So the plans for Normandy Invasion were already kind of being practiced.
It was already put into practice, yes.
Okay, so you guys pretty much knew that this was something you were going to face in real life. Before you were part of that invasion, did you see any other combat? Anything else?
None whatsoever. We didn't see any combat at all until we got on Normandy Beach.
So tell me about just the timeline of you going, to Europe.
Well, the war was going on, and the planning was going on for the invasion. And we went to England, and we're still doing a lot of training, like we went in the Army. And then we got orders to go aboard a ship on the 5th of June.
Okay.
And that was the beginning of the invasion of Normandy.
Okay.
And of course, there was a big storm come up, so they had to postpone it a day.
Right.
Now, I was supposed to go in on the 6th of June, and we were in our small boats ready to go in and land on Normandy, and we got orders from the beach 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Take your men back aboard ship because we don't have any room on the beach to put anybody. All the corpses and the wounded people and the equipment that had been, we just don't have any room to put anybody.
So you were supposed to go there on the first day.
Yeah.
But because it was such bloodshed, and that they just decided to give
I went in on the second day at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Which was the 7th.
Yeah, and most of the firing was going over the hills. The Army had already taken much of the beach and was pushing the Germans back.
Okay. So before just to back up, the week before,
well,
are you nervous? You guys are all nervous.
We went out of a little place was in Salcombe, England, that we were bedding down, and one day we got orders to go to a wired-by enclosed large area with barbed wire and Marines. Then we knew something was happening, and the Marines were guarding fences, and they said, if you get too close and try to get out, you'll shoot to kill. We got no information coming and going, but we knew that it was an invasion coming off then.
And what was the mood like?
It all depends on who the person is. Some were happy, some were scared to death, and it was just a mixture of feelings going in. Some had no feelings at all, like me. I didn't know what was going to happen, so I didn't know what to expect. So
I mean,
I just went along with the shore.
The ship you're on, it's crossing the English Channel basically to get into France.
We went over on our small boats that we came over from England on. The English people had furnished anything they could, fishing boats or anything else, to get the people over to Normandy.
Okay.
So it was mostly English transportation we had to go into England. Now I'm talking about me, okay?
Right, yeah.
Some other people might have gone in earlier on the first day, could have been on small boats. And by the way, the small boats were coxswained by Coast Guard.
By the U.S. Coast Guard.
Yeah, okay. U.S. Coast Guard.
And so...
Oh, no, back up. Yeah, Coast Guard.
Okay. And so you're also going in with just other Allied soldiers as well?
Yes, we had English soldiers on the ship with us. Let me tell you how they formed to go on the beach. I think you'd be interested in this.
Yeah.
You'd get off on a small boat, which would hold 30 people, and the boats would circle until they got 10 boats, and then they would be circling around. And once they got 10 in a row, they would make it on a straight row and go into the beach together on those 10 boats.
So, but you weren't facing a lot of gunfire, just...
No, the only gunfire that we faced was when we were going down the beach. It was a pretty day, like today, 55 degrees. And you want me to tell you about the story about the lieutenant we had?
Sure, yeah. Tell me about the lieutenant.
The lieutenant we had was a Marine, and he said he wanted some action, so he joined the Navy, the beach battalions. And so he marched us and like beat us to death in England. And he says, we're going to take so many prisoners and we're going to take so many pillboxes and etc. when we landed on the beach. Well, we landed on the beach, and when we did, there was no fire directly on the beach. So he lined us up on a column of twos, and we started marching down the beach. And we got about 50 yards straight down the beach, and the machine gun fire started at us, blizzing by our heads. So we dropped behind some logs to keep from getting hit. And the sergeant, not the sergeant, but the lieutenant dropped behind the logs too, and he didn't get up in them logs till the next day. we had to dig a foxhole for him that night and put planks over the top so he wouldn't get hit by shrapnel. We didn't ever see him anymore after that day. Okay.
That's funny. So you said shrapnel. You also saw a lot of bombs and stuff like that.
Airplanes dropping bombs over the beach also.
Okay. So you first land there. What do you see?
First when I landed on the beach was 18 and 19-year-olds laying on the beach holding their intestines in because their stomach had blown open. Wow. And they were yelling, "Mama, Mama, help me." I'll never forget that.
Wow. So these were 18, 19-year-olds from the previous day?
Yeah.
And they were just laying there. Were they getting any sort of medical attention from you guys or from anybody?
Didn't have enough people to pick them up to carry them to, and didn't have enough people to try to patch them up. They just had to lay there until they get time to pick them up.
Wow. So
someone laid as much as 3 days before they got picked up.
Wow. Screaming for their mom.
Right.
Which is kind of, you revert kind of to a childish stage at that point.
Right.
And that's all you can think of.
So we got to the beach after we landed on the 7th. Our beach battalion had radiomen, corpsmen,
right,
boat repair. I called it the grunt group that I was in. We helped carry the wounded where we could. We carried the dead to the graveyard that was buried on Omaha Beach, and just did anything that had to be done on the beach. Now, like the boat repair, they did their job repairing boats that they could send back out again.
Right.
And the radioman was talking to the people that were the Army. The Army couldn't talk to the Navy, and the Navy couldn't talk to the Army. We were in between.
Yeah.
They would talk to us, and we'd talk to each other.
So you're the middleman for
yeah. So after 3 weeks, they put us back to England.
Oh wow! Okay.
The beach battalion back to England.
So you stayed on the beach pretty much the whole time you were there?
3 weeks, yeah.
And what were you doing mostly there? I mean, you had already pretty much.
Anything that needed to be done, we would do. If it meant get a truck out of a hole that was stuck, we'd help them get it out of that.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned there were, you buried a lot of dead.
Yeah.
How many dead were there?
Well, it was a lot, yes.
Wow.
I got pictures of the graveyard.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And you had to, so you were literally digging,
and if you need to run an errand for the lieutenant that was in charge, you'd take a note to somebody else where he wanted something to go to, And as I say, the boat people repaired the boats, the radioman talking to ships back and forth, and the signalman had semaphores. You remember what a semaphore is?
A what?
A semaphore?
No.
Well, he has two flags in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
One's, I can't remember the number, I think one was red and one was yellow. Mm-hmm. And they talked to the ships coming in with those flags. Mm-hmm. And because we didn't have radar then.
Right. Oh, wow.
And the radio, the signalman repaired whoever they could repair, German or American, doesn't make any difference.
Right.
They helped whoever they could.
Really? They helped Germans?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, were there Germans still there fighting when you were there? I mean, did you capture people?
Well, but the Germans had gone over the hill. Mm-hmm. The Americans had driven them over the hill.
Right.
So there wasn't much going on. It wasn't any fun going on the beach at all when I was there.
Right.
Because they had pushed them back over the hill.
Okay.
But there was fighting going on there because you could hear the bombs blowing.
Right.
And the guns firing all the time. Mm-hmm.
So they weren't that far away.
Yeah.
And just trying to think of what I'm trying to visualize it in my head. You probably still see it pretty clear as day in yours, right? Even this so much time afterwards.
Yeah, well, I give talks to the high schools, juniors and seniors, and I have a picture. I got a picture on the wall that I show some of this stuff.
Right.
And I'll talk to them about what's happening here and what's happening here and what's happening here.
Right. Yeah, and I saw your presentation. I saw that you had a lot of photos of. There was one photo I remember. It's a bomb going off in the water, and you happen to capture. What was the story behind that picture again?
The bombs didn't go off in the water because we had balloons, air balloons. Now the soldier was holding a rope, and they were just high enough so the Germans couldn't come in. If they did, they got tangled up in the balloons.
Oh, in their plane.
When they were coming in the bomb, they couldn't do it because they got tangled up in the ropes that we were holding up.
It's the simplest things at work, I guess. Wow. But wasn't there a picture of an explosion? You said somebody caught the picture right at the right time?
That was a bomb that got through the Germans and dropped the bomb.
Oh, so they got through and dropped one.
Somebody was lucky enough to have a camera and take a picture of it.
Wow. So tell me about, just a little more about the 3 weeks that you were there. You just were doing odd jobs, whether it took...
Odd jobs, whatever it took to do the job that needed to be done.
Okay.
One thing though that you might be interested in is we had no cooks. The army was supposed to feed us.
Right.
They didn't do it.
So what'd you do for food?
So we stole the food from the army. We'd catch a truck coming in with supplies, and we'd get a fella up front to talk to the driver. We had 3 or 4 back checking it out.
So what were you staying? Was it just tents, or what were you staying in at night?
Foxhole.
Oh wow! So you didn't even, there was nothing, put together for you to have any shelter at all, huh?
Mm-mm.
So you just, wow.
I dug a foxhole for the first night I was there. I dug a foxhole at the water's edge, and I didn't know at that time that the water went out a mile and came back in a mile, and I had dug my foxhole where the water was out.
Right. So
all of a sudden I felt something hitting my feet.
It was the water.
It was an arm or a leg or something that was pushing in, hitting.
Oh, from one of the victims.
From one of the guys that got blown up. Yeah.
Oh wow. So, so the 3 weeks is over. What are you hearing about just what's going on in the front lines, I guess?
Yeah, we didn't hear much except what the newspaper people that were there would get on the radio and give it back. We could get radio, what did they call it? I don't know. Anyhow, we could hear the news broadcast and what they were saying.
Were you getting good information on the war itself?
Yeah, we had.
What was going on the Eastern Front at the same time and all that stuff?
Yeah, we could hear that too.
Really?
But that wasn't as much as what we heard, of course.
Right. So, okay, after your 3 weeks are over, you finally get news that, you're going back to England?
Yeah, we went to England, back to where we were in Salcombe. And we stayed there until October. Mm-hmm. We thought there was going to be a second invasion, but there wasn't.
Oh, really?
So we got orders to go back to America.
Okay.
And we went down to one of the seaports and boarded a USS Wakefield, which was a converted ships that hauled people on like one of these ships was down in Norfolk this week, cruise ships.
Oh, really? A cruise? Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
a luxury kind of
Yeah,
cruise.
it had
Yeah.
been converted to haul people back to the States.
Oh, wow.
And we stayed in Boston 3 weeks, and they discommanded us.
This commanded meaning like just pretty much.
We were no longer a beach battalion. No, we were no longer attached to the Army.
Oh, okay, so you were
We were now
Navy.
Navy.
Okay.
They give us 21 days to travel to the West Coast, Oceanside, California.
Really? So you were on, okay.
All right, and we stayed in Oceanside, California for 3 weeks, and then they put us aboard. We got orders to go to Washington State. We picked up a brand new troop transport, APA, that would haul troops out to the islands, pick up the wounded, and carry troops that need to be there.
In the Pacific?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
We traveled 72,000 miles in 18 months on a ship.
So obviously, this after the D-Day invasion, things start heating up in the Pacific.
Yeah,
and that's where they needed you.
That was our end into the European War.
Right.
We went Okinawa, and that's when I had the kamikaze planes flying.
Oh, wow.
And one of them flew over our fantail, 500 feet above it. We could see the pilot sitting in his seat, and he hit the USS Birmingham on a destroyer,
right,
and went down the smokestack engine and killed 500 sailors on it. You don't hear these stories in the news.
Right, no, you don't.
You don't hear them.
Wow. So they were flying around right near you, huh?
Well, yeah. What happened is they would come in. The sun would be in your eyes. Sun was setting.
Right.
And they'd fly into your eyes.
So you wouldn't be able to see them.
So you couldn't see them, but there was so much fire going up. Not many kamikaze planes got through. We downed most of them.
Wow. So you were ready for them.
Yeah. We delivered troops and picked up wounded out of Okinawa. We stayed there for 8 days doing that. It took time loading the wounded people on the ship because we didn't have but 3 operating rooms on the ship. The ship wasn't big enough for that.
Right.
So the worst off would go in and be operated on first, and they'd take line,
Right.
stand in line to get operated on, or lay in the bed wherever they had to.
Right. So you had you said 3 were they operating rooms?
3 operating rooms on the ship, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And how many doctors did you have on there? Medics?
We had 5 doctors.
Wow.
No, actually, each platoon had a doctor.
Okay.
I should tell you how a platoon was organized in the beach battalion, so you will know.
Okay.
We had 9 platoons, like the Army.
Right.
The Army had platoons. We had 9 platoons, and each one of them had 42 men in it.
Right.
They had a beach master, an assistant beach master, and a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So that meant there was 9 doctors there.
Right.
And then on board ship, when we got on board ship, we had about 8 doctors there.
Mm-hmm. And where are you when Japan surrenders? Where were you when that happened?
I was out at sea.
Okay.
No, I wasn't either. I'll tell you where I was. I was in Honolulu.
Okay.
We were on maneuvers, and we were practicing lowering the smokes on small boats on the side that we were going to load the guys in to go in for the invasions. We lost 3 men doing that. We were lowering one of the boats, and the front boat that was holding the rope down so keep it level
Right.
went in 2, and that was the boat next to the fantail where the propellers were, and there was 3 men on the boat.
Wow.
We lost 2 of them, never know what happened to them. But 1 man escaped. He got free of charge of the propellers that was sucking the other 2 men in.
Oh, wow.
That's the only 2 people we lost during the war.
Wow. Did you know at the time about the bombs, the atom bombs?
Mm-hmm.
So you had already known about that. Okay, wow. And so what was the feeling when you learned that the war was over?
Yippee. We were glad it was over with, yeah.
Wow. So what happens then? You go back to the West Coast base, or do you
We go back into Richmond, California, and pick up troops, occupational troops, to carry into different locations in Japan.
Right.
We made 3 trips to Sasebo, Japan, which was the largest Japanese seaplane base.
Wow.
We did it 3 times, and that was our occupation duties, and that was all we had to do. We were then set to go back home to San Francisco.
Okay.
Well, we got to Guam and we got orders to go to China.
Really?
Said go to China. There's 600 Marines up there that have been cut off by the Japanese-Chinese war, and they didn't know the war's over with.
Wow.
They got no news at all. So we went up there to pick them up, and some of them had already been, they didn't think the war would ever end or they'd ever go home. So they had married and had families started in China.
Really? Wow.
Some of them didn't want to come. You didn't ever hear this in the news, okay?
No, yeah.
And you would think I'm telling you a lie, but I'm not.
So they have no idea the war's ending.
Didn't know the war was over until we got there.
And they don't think they're ever coming back, is that?
Some of them didn't want to go back. They wanted to stay with their families in Japan. They had
Right,
children and all.
Okay.
But Uncle Sam says, come home, and I'm sure they all did. But I'm sure a lot of them went back to Japan also.
To Japan or China?
I mean China.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Throughout your time in Europe and in Japan and China, did you talk to a lot of civilians? Did you meet up and see a lot of civilians, or did you interact with them?
Saw a lot of civilians, but they were standoffish. They don't want to.
I imagine they would be.
Yeah. The Japanese had everybody on the land, including the 10, 12 years old, has a stick in their hand to hit off the Americans when they came aboard shore.
And even after they surrendered, they were. Oh wow.
The ladies had pitchforks.
Wow.
But the Japanese had just taken everything away from the Philippines and so forth.
Right.
And the poor people had no clothes to wear. The women went around bare-chested. The kids until they were 7 years old were naked. They didn't have any clothes to wear.
Wow.
People don't know about this.
Yeah. So, in Europe, when you were in Normandy, did you meet up with any civilians? Did you see anybody there who wasn't?
Oh yes, the French would come over and they'd bring us eggs and chickens.
Oh, so at least you got a little food from them too.
But we still went hungry. They didn't have enough to share with us.
Yeah, I would imagine. Do you ever go back? Have you ever gone back to either or?
I went back to Normandy 5 times.
Wow.
Carried my wife 4 or 5 times, and I carried my daughters 1 time.
Wow. And what'd they think of it?
Oh, they were spellbound.
What is there now? There are a lot of memorials and stuff like that?
Yeah, there's memorials there, and there's museums there.
Wow.
And the sand is as smooth as this. And I didn't tell you that the sand, you can go out a mile on an automobile.
Really?
On that, I was telling you about this,
Right.
the way the sea going out, where you could ride out for a mile. But you better turn around and come back in a hurry because it came back 20, 25 miles an hour, came back in. So you didn't get caught out there.
Wow. So what do you think about, when you look back at your life in that time?
I'll put it this way. I wouldn't take $1 million for the experience, but I wouldn't give you 10 cents to do it again. Okay.
Now, here's the thing. We're at the point in media and in Hollywood where we're remaking a lot of this stuff 60, 70 years later. When you look at, do you watch those movies? Do you watch World War II movies that are being made today when they come out?
Not much.
Not much.
So much is not the truth.
Really?
Well, they like to glorify all their movies, Saving Private Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
When they landed the small boats, it was pretty well like it was.
Right.
But they had one of the 7th Beach Battalion helmets on their head coming in on that. Nobody knew that until somebody one day was looking at it and said, look, that's a 7th Beach Battalion guy with a helmet on.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much all I really have. Oh, yeah, I meant to ask you this. Your wife, I know you talked a lot about her in the presentation. When did you get married?
Well, I'll tell you how I met her first of all, okay?
Okay.
I was working in a drugstore, and the gentleman had a plate glass on the east. When the sun rose in the morning, it got real hot in the store, so he put an awning down, and we had to take the awning up and down every morning. Mm-hmm. So this was my morning, and take the awnings down. And I was taking it down, and somebody tapped me on the shoulder and says, "Good morning, Leon." Mm-hmm. I turned around, I wasn't Leon. She ran like a scared rabbit.
So who was Leon?
Huh?
So she thought you were somebody else.
Yeah, there was a little fellow that lived next door to her was my size and mostly looked like me, okay?
Oh, okay.
And I had my back to her.
Oh, okay.
But anyhow, she had a boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
She didn't really care for him too much, but he cared for her a lot.
Oh, okay.
When he got ready to go in the Army, he was drafted to go into the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't see much of her for a year.
Right.
And he came in the drugstore where I was. He got drafted. He stuck his finger in my face and said, "Don't you date my girlfriend while I'm gone."
Mm-hmm.
Well, I didn't say anything. The next day I asked her for a date.
And he was gone.
66 years later, I lost my wife.
Oh, wow. So this is before you joined, or you were drafted. Okay. Wow. Okay, so you're going all around the world. You're in Europe, and how are you keeping contact with her? Just letters, right?
Letters is all, but we didn't get them too often.
Right.
Maybe every 2 week we get a letter.
Oh, okay.
But there was no communication while we were in that barbed wire fence. There was nothing going, nothing coming.
Right, because I know that they were pretty strict on what kind of communication.
Eisenhower didn't want anybody to know it was going to be an invasion.
Right, right.
Well, he knew it, but he didn't know when.
So when you got married after you got out of the Army or the Navy, I should say.
I got out in February. We got married in May.
Oh, wow. So how long altogether were you in the service?
2 years and 4 months.
Wow.
And I got out before I was supposed to.
Right.
We went on board ship, and I was a second-class boatswain mate. And I asked the executive officer, who was my boss, I said, "I haven't been home in 18 months. I'd like to have a 30-day leave."
Right.
He said, "Sure." He said, "I got 12 guys who are getting out of the service now, and I put you in charge of them with the books, with the discharge papers to carry over to Treasure Island."
Mm-hmm.
He said, "Here's your 30-day papers." I said, "Okay." So I went there and got rid of the 12 sailors that were getting out, and I said, "Now, here are my orders." He looked at him, he says, "What the hell did you say?" I said, "I'm getting out and going 30-day leave." He said, "The hell you are. You're getting out of the Navy." The executive officer had written my orders to get out of the Navy, and he didn't tell me I did. I didn't know it until I got there. I got out 6 months early.
Wow. All right. Well, I'm just going to ask if you have anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap this up.
Well,
that I might have missed.
I can tell you about stealing some food. Do you want?
Well, you told me a story about how you stole food from the
Army.
From the Army on the beach because you distract the driver.
Well, this time we were standing on the beach talking, about 5 of us, and here two of our guys running down the beach with an arm full of food. And he says, dig a hole. We know what he'd done. He stole food, and so we buried it in the ground under sand.
Buried the food.
Yeah, so about 15 minutes later, here comes this lieutenant and sergeant in a Jeep. He jumped out all firing mad and said, "All right, where's that food you stole from us?" "What done, sir? We don't see. Do you see any food anywhere, sir?" They stood and argued for about 15 or 20 minutes, and finally they left. The funny part was that the lieutenant was standing right on top of it.
On top of the food. He didn't sink into it or anything like that.
That's one of the funny things.
That is funny. Wow. All right. Well, that's all I have.
Okay.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and talking to me.
Be glad to do it.
All right. And hopefully maybe we can do it again sometime.
Hope you learned a lot.
I did. A lot of stuff I didn't know. All right. Thank you.
You're certainly welcome, sir.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Westminster Canterbury Tales podcast. Thank you for listening.